The sky burned crimson above the barren plains of Helios 9, matching the blood that soaked the rocky ground. Captain Rorik Voss dragged himself behind the wreckage of a transport vehicle, clutching his vibroblade with white knuckles. His combat armor, once pristine with the insignia of the Terran Defense Force, now hung in charred tatters from his frame. "Status report," he croaked into his damaged comm unit. Static answered, punctuated by distant screams and the distinctive howl of Cthari energy weapons. 24 hours ago, his battalion had been intact, elite soldiers sent to repel the alien invasion of this mining colony. Now, they were scattered, broken, or dead. The Cthari warband had been ruthlessly efficient, their tactics unlike anything in Terran military records. Rorik peered around the edge of his cover. Through the swirling dust, he caught sight of them, tall, powerful figures moving with deadly grace, their armored forms adorned with trophies from previous conquests. At their center strode a warrior who towered above the rest, her crimson battle harness glinting with embedded crystals that marked her rank. Shenra, the warlord of the Cthari Crimson Lance clan. Her reputation had spread across 3 star systems, undefeated in combat, merciless to her enemies. Rorik had one functioning weapon, no reinforcements, and a responsibility to the few survivors who might still be hiding in the colony's underground shelters. The logical choice was retreat. But retreat meant abandoning those civilians to the Cthari, known for taking slaves from conquered worlds. He made his decision. Stepping out from cover, Rorik raised his blade in the ancient gesture of challenge he'd seen referenced in intelligence briefings about Cthari culture. "I am Captain Rorik Voss of the Terran Defense Force," he shouted across the battlefield. "I challenge Shenra of the Crimson Lance to single combat." The alien warriors turned toward him, their insectoid helmets reflecting the fires burning across the landscape. For a moment, silence fell over the battlefield. Then a deep, resonant laugh broke the stillness. The towering warlord removed her helmet, revealing features both alien and striking, silver-blue skin stretched over a strong bone structure, eyes like molten gold, and a crest of what resembled spines or quills where hair would be on a human, currently bound in elaborate warrior braids. "A human who knows our ways," Shenra said, her voice carrying the strange harmonic quality of Cthari speech, though her command of the human language was perfect. How unusual. She approached with confident strides, her warriors creating a circle around them. "You have no hope of victory, human. Why sacrifice yourself?" "To protect those who cannot fight," Rorik answered, settling into a combat stance. "Agree to spare the civilians if I give you a worthy battle." Shenra's alien features formed what might have been a smile. "Honorable. Foolish, but honorable. Very well, Captain Voss. Should you prove worthy, the non-combatants will be unharmed." Without further warning, she lunged forward with shocking speed. Rorik barely deflected her first strike with his vibroblade, the impact jarring his arm to the shoulder. He countered with a move that would have disarmed any human opponent, but Shenra merely adjusted her grip and drove him back 3 steps. The duel became a desperate dance. Rorik employed every technique from his years of combat training, occasionally landing glancing blows against the warlord's armor. But Shenra was stronger, faster, and fresh, while he was exhausted and injured from the preceding battle. When the end came, it was decisive. A sweeping blow knocked his weapon aside, and Shenra's armored fist struck his chest with enough force to crack ribs. Rorik collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. Shenra stood over him, her blade at his throat. The Cthari warriors watched, anticipating the killing stroke that traditionally ended such challenges. Instead, Shenra tilted her head, studying him with those golden eyes. "You fought well, human. Better than any I've faced in many cycles." She lowered her blade slightly. It would be wasteful to kill one with such spirit. She reached down and gripped his chin, forcing his face up to meet her gaze. "I claim this warrior as my Kareth Ti," she announced to her stunned followers. Rorik understood enough Kthari terminology to recognize the word. War prize. Personal property. I belong to no one, he hissed through clenched teeth. Shenra's alien smile widened. You belong to me now, Captain Voss. And I think you may prove far more valuable than this miserable colony. The Kthari war camp sprawled across the valley floor like a living organism of metal and stone. Massive transport vessels served as command centers, surrounded by hundreds of portable shelter units arranged in concentric rings according to clan hierarchy. Rorik observed everything from his position near Shenra's personal quarters, a distinctive structure marked with her clan's insignia. 3 days had passed since his capture, and Rorik was still trying to understand his status. He wasn't chained or confined to a cell, but the warriors watched him constantly. The translator implant behind his ear allowed him to understand most of their language, though many concepts remained foreign. The other sub-commanders question your decision, said Vexra, Shenra's second-in-command, as they stood outside the warlord's quarters. The tall Kthari warrior had been assigned as his guard, much to her obvious displeasure. Taking a Karath Ti is rare enough, but a human one? Unprecedented. Your opinion on the matter? Rorik asked, testing boundaries. Vexra's crest flattened slightly, a sign of annoyance, he'd learned. Irrelevant. Shenra is Warlord. Her will is absolute. A horn sounded across the camp, signaling midday. Warriors moved with purpose toward the central training grounds, and Vexra gestured for Rorik to follow. The training session revealed much about Kthari culture. They valued individual combat prowess but trained in coordinated units. Their fighting style combined raw power with a fluid grace that human military specialists had never fully documented. Shenra appeared midway through the session, her presence causing an immediate ripple of attention. She wore lighter training armor that revealed more of her blue-silver skin and the intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings across her arms and shoulders. Captain Voss, she called, beckoning him forward. Observe closely. Perhaps you will learn something useful. She proceeded to demonstrate combat techniques against 4 warriors simultaneously, moving with stunning precision. When she finished, leaving her opponents yielding on the ground, she turned to Rorik. Your assessment? Rorik considered carefully. Your warriors favor strength in their initial approach. Against a smaller, faster enemy, that creates vulnerability in the second phase of engagement. A murmur ran through the gathered warriors. Vexra stepped forward, hand on her weapon. You dare criticize? No, Shenra interrupted, raising a hand. He observes correctly. She approached Rorik, studying him with those unnerving golden eyes. You have tactical insight. Use it. Show us this vulnerability. It was clearly a test. Rorik hesitated only briefly before stepping into the training circle. Shenra matched his stance, and suddenly they were sparring, not the desperate fight to the death from days before, but a controlled demonstration. Rorik employed the technique he'd mentioned, using her momentum against her. For a brief moment, he actually gained advantage, forcing Shenra to adjust her stance. The watching warriors fell silent. The moment passed quickly. Shenra countered with a move he couldn't anticipate, and Rorik found himself flat on his back, the wind knocked from his lungs. But instead of mockery, he heard interested murmurs from the Kthari. Shenra extended a hand, pulling him to his feet with ease. The human has something to teach us, she announced. He will join combat training sessions. Later, as dusk settled over the camp, Rorik was summoned to Shenra's quarters. The interior was austere but for the weapons displayed on the walls, trophies from countless victories. Sit, she commanded, indicating a place across from her at a low table where a meal had been prepared. You've caused quite a stir among my warriors. That wasn't my intention, Rorik replied cautiously. No? Shenra's alien features formed that now familiar expression of amusement. Then what is your intention, Captain Voss? To escape? To sabotage? To survive? To understand, he answered honestly. I've never heard of a human being taken as Kareth before. What exactly does that mean for me? Shenra leaned forward. It means you belong to me, by right of combat. But unlike the primitive version of slavery your kind imagines, Kareth is a position of potential. War prizes who prove worthy may rise in status. And those who don't prove worthy? Her golden eyes narrowed. They don't survive long enough to worry about it. Shenra pushed a bowl toward him. Eat. It's compatible with human physiology. Tomorrow we break camp and move toward the central settlements. The true campaign begins. Rorik realized the attack on the mining colony had been merely a prelude. Why tell me your plans? Because, Captain Voss, Shenra said, studying him with unexpected intensity, I believe you may be far more valuable than just a trophy of war. You understand strategy. You adapt quickly. These are traits the Kthari respect. And if I refuse to cooperate? Shenra didn't answer immediately. She rose and moved to a viewport, gazing out at the stars emerging in the alien sky. The universe is changing, human. Old alliances fracture. New powers emerge. Your Terran Defense Force sees only the threat we pose, not the greater dangers gathering beyond the rim worlds. She turned back to him. Cooperate or not, that is your choice. But know that your people face extinction if they continue to stand alone. For the first time, Rorik glimpsed something beyond the Warlord's fearsome reputation, a leader carrying the weight of knowledge and responsibility that extended far beyond conquest. That night, lying on his assigned sleeping pallet, Rorik considered his position with new perspective. He was a prisoner, yes, but also potentially something more. A bridge between two species? A valuable asset? Or merely a temporary curiosity for an alien warlord? Whatever his role, one thing became clear, surviving among the Kthari would require him to become something more than the soldier he had been. The question was whether that transformation would cost him his humanity. Dawn broke over the mountains with harsh crimson light as Rorik completed his 15th circuit around the perimeter of the new encampment. The Kthari had relocated their forces to a strategic valley 3 days' journey from the mining colony, establishing a more permanent base of operations. After a week among them, Rorik had developed a routine, training at dawn, tactical briefings by midday, and evenings spent learning Kthari combat techniques. Today was different. A tension permeated the camp that Rorik hadn't experienced before. The Drakari scouts were spotted near the eastern ridge, Vexra explained as she fell into step beside him. Her initial hostility had gradually shifted to a grudging professional respect. They are our ancestral enemies, a rival clan that has opposed Shenra's leadership from the beginning. I thought all Kthari were united in this campaign, Rorik said, watching warriors prepare defenses with practiced efficiency. Vexra's crest rippled with what he now recognized as dark amusement. United? No. The Kthari are never truly united. We follow strength. Shenra commands the Crimson Lance and 6 allied clans, but the Drakari have always challenged her authority. Before Rorik could inquire further, alarms resonated throughout the camp. Warriors rushed to defensive positions as Vexra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the command center. Inside, Shenra stood before a three-dimensional tactical display, her expression grim. She acknowledged Rorik's presence with a brief nod before addressing her commanders. The Drakari have aligned with the sundered Fang clan. Their combined forces outnumber ours. Her golden eyes swept across the assembled warriors. They believe our attention to the human settlements has weakened us. They will learn otherwise. As the commanders dispersed to prepare for battle, Shenra beckoned Rorik closer. Your people have a saying about the enemy of your enemy, she said. Being your friend, Rorik finished. Are you suggesting the Drakari might align with human forces? They already have, Shenra revealed, manipulating the tactical display to show intercepted communications. They promise your military commanders they will withdraw all Kthari forces if they defeat me. A lie, of course. The Drakari would simply continue the invasion under their banner. The revelation shifted something in Rorik's understanding. Why are you telling me this? Because today you choose, Captain Voss. Shenra's voice carried an unexpected weight. You may remain here, protected during the battle, or you may stand with us. If you choose the latter, you will no longer be merely Kareth Ti. The offer hung between them, significant in ways Rorik couldn't fully grasp. And if I stand with you? What would that make me? Kthari. Battle companion. Something flickered in her golden eyes. It is a position of honor. Before Rorik could respond, explosions rocked the perimeter. The Drakari attack had begun. Decide quickly, Shenra said, donning her battle helmet. In that moment, Rorik's choice became clear. The Drakari alliance with human military commanders was almost certainly tactical and temporary. More importantly, he had seen enough of Shenra to recognize a leader of principle, however alien those principles might be. I'll need a weapon, he said. Shenra's expression shifted to something he couldn't read, but she unsheathed a secondary blade from her armor and extended it to him. Fight well, human. The battle erupted across the valley with ferocious intensity. The Drakari warriors were distinguishable by their black armor with red markings, moving in aggressive formations that contrasted with the disciplined defense of Shenra's forces. Rorik found himself fighting alongside Vexra's unit, defending the western approach. His combat training served him well, but it was his understanding of tactical weaknesses that proved most valuable. They're concentrating forces to penetrate near the command center, he shouted to Vexra over the chaos. It's a diversion. Their main force is circling to strike from the ridge. Vexra hesitated only briefly before signaling to her warriors. They adjusted their position just as a wave of Drakari fighters descended from the concealed position Rorik had identified. The fighting was brutal, hand-to-hand combat unlike anything in Rorik's experience. A Drakari warrior twice his size charged him, energy blade humming with lethal intent. Rorik sidestepped, using the technique Shenra had demonstrated days earlier, and found an opening in the warrior's defenses. One battle merged into another as the day wore on. Rorik lost track of time, aware only of the immediate threats and the warriors fighting alongside him, no longer aliens but comrades in arms. Near dusk, a collective roar went up from the Crimson Lance warriors. The Drakari forces were retreating, their attempted surprise attack thwarted. As the fighting subsided, Rorik found himself standing amidst Kthari warriors who regarded him with new expressions, respect, curiosity, and something approaching acceptance. Shenra found him as healers tended to a gash across his shoulder. You fought well, she said, removing her helmet. Her own armor bore the marks of intense combat, and a fresh scar traced her jawline. The warriors speak of how you anticipated the ridge attack. You saved many lives. It was basic tactics, Rorik said, wincing as the healer applied a regenerative compound to his wound. It was insight that none of my commanders had, Shenra corrected. You see patterns differently. That perspective has value. When the healer finished, Shenra dismissed her with a gesture and sat beside Rorik. For a moment, neither spoke, sharing the peculiar quiet that follows survival. The Drakari will return, she finally said. This was merely their first attempt. We'll be ready, Rorik replied, then paused at his unconscious use of we. Shenra noticed. A smile, more genuine than any he'd seen from her, briefly softened her features. Yes, we will. She placed her hand over his, a gesture that seemed both alien and intimate. You have earned your place, Kthari. That evening, Rorik joined the victory celebration as something other than a prize of war. Warriors who had previously avoided him now included him in their circles, sharing fermented drinks and battle stories. He learned names, clan histories, and fragments of a culture far more complex than human intelligence had ever documented. Later, when the camp had quieted, Shenra summoned him to her quarters. Unlike before, the atmosphere between them had shifted, charged with something unspoken. "Among my people," she said, studying him with those golden eyes that now seemed to hold depths he hadn't noticed before, "a warrior who proves themselves in battle earns the right to choose their path forward." "And what paths are available to me?" Rorik asked, suddenly aware of how close she stood. "More than you might imagine," Shenra answered, her voice lowering to a register that sent an unexpected shiver through him. "Tomorrow we plan our counter-strategy against the Drakari. Tonight." She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with surprising gentleness. "Tonight we honor survival in the Kthari way." As Rorik looked into her alien features, no longer strange but increasingly familiar, he realized that the boundaries between captor and companion had already begun to blur beyond recognition. 3 weeks after the Drakari attack, Rorik stood beside Shenra at the tactical command table, both of them examining holographic terrain projections of the upcoming battleground. Their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, mutual respect layered with a deepening personal connection that transcended species barriers. "The Drakari have reinforced this position," Rorik said, indicating a mountain pass. "Traditional Kthari assault tactics would result in heavy casualties." Shenra nodded, her golden eyes narrowed in concentration. "What do you propose instead?" "A combined approach. Your warriors excel at direct combat, but human special forces use infiltration techniques that could disable their shield generators before the main assault." Several sub-commanders shifted uncomfortably at this suggestion. Incorporating human tactics into Kthari battle doctrine remained controversial, despite Rorik's proven value. "The human strategy has merit," Shenra declared, silencing dissent with a look. "Vexra, select your best warriors for the infiltration team. Rorik will train them." As the commanders dispersed, Shenra's hand brushed against Rorik's, a subtle gesture that carried meaning only they understood. In the privacy that followed, she moved closer. "The warriors now call you Rorikthar," she said, amusement coloring her voice. "It means, human who thinks like Kthari." "Is that a compliment?" he asked, returning her smile. "The highest," she replied, her expression softening. Few outsiders have ever been given a clan name. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a proximity alarm. A scout rushed in, crest flared in alarm. "Warlord! Drakari forces have breached our outer perimeter." The ensuing battle was not the carefully planned engagement they had prepared for, but a chaotic defense against a desperate enemy assault. Rorik fought alongside Kthari warriors who now treated him as one of their own, his movements synchronized with theirs after weeks of shared training. The tide turned when Shenra led a countercharge against the Drakari command unit, her battle prowess magnificent to behold. But as she engaged the enemy warlord in single combat, a hidden Drakari assassin moved to strike from behind. Rorik saw the danger and reacted without thought, throwing himself between the assassin and Shenra. The energy blade meant for her back sliced across his chest instead. Through searing pain, he managed to disable his attacker, collapsing as Shenra finished her opponent. He awoke in the medical unit, his torso wrapped in regenerative bandages that glowed with bioluminescent healing compounds. Shenra sat beside him, her armor removed, wearing only the fitted undergarment that revealed the full pattern of bioluminescent markings across her skin. "You risked your life for mine," she said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Seemed like the thing to do at the time," Rorik managed, trying to sit up. Shenra placed a hand on his shoulder, keeping him still. "The healers say you will recover fully, but you must rest." "Did we win?" "Decisively. The remaining Drakari have retreated beyond the outer systems. Her golden eyes studied him with an intensity that made his breath catch. Why did you do it, Rorik? You could have let me fall and perhaps negotiated your freedom with the Drakari. Is that what you think I want? Freedom to return to a military that would never understand what I've seen here? What I've become? He reached for her hand. I made my choice weeks ago, Shenra. Something vulnerable flickered across her alien features. Among my people, to save a warlord's life creates a bond that cannot be broken. Her fingers interlaced with his. I claimed you as Kareth Ti by right of combat, but now I would ask you to stay by choice. As what? Rorik asked, though he already knew the answer in the way she looked at him. As Terii, she said softly. Life companion. Equal partner in all things. Rorik pulled her closer, their foreheads touching in the Kthari gesture of deepest intimacy. I accept, he whispered, as the boundaries between them, human and alien, captor and captive, dissolved completely. The great hall of the Crimson Lance flagship vibrated with the rhythmic pounding of Kthari war staffs against the metal floor. At the center of the circular chamber stood Rorik, dressed in ceremonial armor that combined elements of his human military heritage with Kthari design. Silver-blue markings, temporary versions of the bioluminescent patterns born naturally by the Kthari, adorned his exposed skin. 6 months had passed since he first faced Shenra in combat. In that time, he had transformed from prisoner to advisor, from outsider to respected warrior, and finally to something unprecedented in the history of either species. The pounding ceased as Shenra entered, her imposing figure adorned in the full regalia of a Kthari warlord. The assembled clan leaders and warriors bowed their heads in respect, not merely for her status, but for her achievements. Under her leadership, the combined forces had repelled 3 major Drakari counteroffensives and established a stable boundary in the disputed systems. Warriors of the 7 clans, Shenra's voice carried throughout the chamber without effort. Today we mark not just a victory, but a transformation. The human worlds have signed the Treaty of Mutual Defense. For the first time, Kthari and humans stand as allies against the threats that gather beyond the rim. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The treaty had been Rorik's initiative, months of careful negotiation between human diplomatic channels he still maintained and the Kthari clan council. It had required overcoming centuries of mistrust on both sides. This alliance was forged in battle, Shenra continued, but it will be preserved in wisdom. She extended her hand toward Rorik. Come forward, Rorik Thar. As he moved to her side, Rorik remembered the first time he had stood before her, defeated, defiant, expecting death. Now he stood as her equal, their shared experiences having forged a bond that transcended their biological differences. The Council has ratified the treaty, Shenra announced. And with it, they have acknowledged the status of Rorik Thar as Terii to the warlord of the Crimson Lance clan. Her golden eyes held his. First of his kind to be so recognized. The significance wasn't lost on anyone present. Terii status, life companion, had never been granted to a non-Cathari before. It was a declaration that would send ripples across both civilizations. The ceremonial portion complete, the gathering transitioned to celebration. Warriors who had once viewed Rorik with suspicion now shared victory tales with him, treating him as clankin. Yet beneath the festivities, Rorik sensed an undercurrent of anticipation. Later, in the privacy of their shared quarters, Shenra confirmed his instincts. The treaty changes everything, she said, removing her ceremonial armor. You will be expected to serve as liaison between our peoples. There will be resistance from traditionalists on both sides. We knew that would happen, Rorik replied, helping her with the complex fastenings. The question is what you want, beyond politics and treaties. Shenra turned to face him, those alien features now deeply familiar to him. What I want? A rare smile softened her expression. I have what I want. A worthy companion. A strong alliance against our true enemies. She traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. But there is one matter unresolved. Which is your formal status in human society. Her tone grew serious. The Kthari have accepted you as Terii, but your military still lists you as captured in action. You could reclaim your former rank, perhaps serve as official ambassador. The question hung between them, and Rorik realized it was one he'd been avoiding. Returning to human space, even temporarily, meant confronting the life he'd left behind. What would you do, if our positions were reversed? He asked. I would follow the path that allowed me to protect what matters most, she answered without hesitation. Rorik nodded, his decision crystallizing. Then I'll accept the ambassador position. On one condition, that we establish the diplomatic headquarters on the neutral world of Proxima Station. Neither human territory nor Kthari. A place where both our peoples can meet as equals. Shenra's expression brightened with approval. A new beginning. For both our species. She stepped closer, the glowing patterns on her skin illuminating the space between them. And for us. As their foreheads touched in the intimate Kthari gesture, Rorik reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. From prisoner to partner, from enemy to ally, the boundaries that once seemed so rigid had dissolved into something new and unexplored. To new beginnings, he whispered against her skin. Outside their viewport, the stars streaked past as the great vessel carried them toward the future they would forge together, a future neither could have imagined on that blood-soaked battlefield where their story began.